everyone. Welcome to Pursuing Joy, where we share audacious stories of joy-infused strength. I'm Julie Lunsford, and I started Enjoy Workforce Solutions, where we use the Working Genius assessment for recruiting and hiring. I have Denise Shields here, and I'm going to have her go ahead and introduce herself, her business, where she's located, and go into how Working Genius has changed her life. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm Denise Shields, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I come from Canada. So 15 years ago, I moved here to help start a business with my co-founder. And we started really small in a little office, classic startup. We decided to bring fencing to the .com world. So as a hyper niche focus, we sold through Amazon.com, HomeDepot.com. Actually, I should say we sell through Amazon.com, Home Depot, Wayfair, Lowe's, a lot of those large chain e-commerce sites. And that was 15 years ago. And Working Genius was introduced to me because as the business grew, we had to rely more on specialists versus generalists. When you're really small startup, you have to do everything. And as we grew bigger, it was clear my co-founder and I could no longer do everything. And especially in COVID, because we were .com home products, the business completely exploded. And I was faced with the daunting task of trying to build teams and figuring out how to help people work in their strengths. And I was introduced to Working Genius, and it was a total game changer because it allowed me to realize that a good team has a balance of the geniuses. And also some individuals are really jazzed about certain areas of work and they get frustrated and burned out by others. And the inverse is true for other people. Mm-hmm. So the Working Genius really did transform the business and the way I look at our organization and how to help people work more in their strengths and minimize the work that causes them frustration.
Excellent. All right. So we discussed that you not only are implementing this in your company, but you've also shared this with other companies. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. So I have still quite a few contacts in Canada, and I'm affiliated with several companies there. I guess because I'm a galvanizer, so we love to share and give ideas and galvanize around things. So when I found the Working Genius, I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is a game changer. I got certified because I really wanted to learn and dive into it so I could more effectively bring it to our organization. And so we have a location in Canada as well, and I wanted to include them, but it's a very small location. And I thought, well, a little bit more energy would be good. So I invited several of those other companies and did a workshop for them. So I think there was 4 or 5 companies that were represented there. And we had a workshop and it went really well. It was a lot of fun energy. And it was just really cool to see other businesses also embracing this and being able to dial into it to help them create more effective teams and individuals who could work with more joy versus more frustration.
Right. Yes, exactly. For anyone who's not associated with the Working Genius world, Working Genius is an assessment that I know a lot of us have taken. Some of us may even have assessment fatigue, right? But this is more about productivity and where people fall in the line of work. And so the acronym is WIDGET. And so work starts with wonder, and then we go to invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. And Denise's geniuses are galvanizing and tenacity. I was just talking with someone whose frustration was galvanizing, and she tried to launch her own business and just decided that she is actually a better employee than she is a business owner. And it was the galvanizing that was frustrating her in the process because she did not want to put herself out there to sell her products and her company to other people. I personally have noticed in my recruiting that galvanizing is usually a necessary element for a salesperson. How have you seen galvanizing for you personally and then for other people on your team?
That's a great question because our business model, even though we sell through HomeDepot.com, Lowe's, it's very transactional. When you deal with those big companies, a lot of transactions. There's no knocking on doors anymore saying, hey, you want to carry our products on your website. So galvanizing is, interestingly enough, the least represented genius in the company. And not only is it the least represented genius, it's the most represented frustration. So that was really eye-opening to me. But when I started looking at the positions here and getting into it a little bit more, we have a whole operations crew. They ship the boxes, they get the pallets ready to go. They're shipping product to the end user via FedEx or massive pallets to Amazon warehouses. And they're almost all ETs. So at the bottom phase, enable and tenacity. So they just thrive on getting things done. And then I looked at our product development guys, and they're very heavy in the WI. They want to explore and wonder and invent and come up with ideas. And I went to our customer care team, and that's where the galvanizing, as minimally as it is represented in the company, our galvanizers are there in customer care. And I think that is a big thing because they're on the phone, they're talking to people, they're engaging with people, they're getting excited from asking customers, or when customers call, hey, I need a fence. What kind do you think would work for me? That is where they are selling, or at least assisting more. So I fully agree that in my experience, people who have to do some selling or at least putting some spinning some momentum around things, galvanizing is a must, or they are going to burn out in that position.
No, that makes sense. What are some areas where in your job, because we know we all would love to be in our geniuses all the time, but we do have to be in our competencies and then our frustrations at some point. Where do you see that show up for you? What is a day that maybe you feel more drained because you're in your frustrations?
Definitely, my frustrations are W and E. So it's when you're asking me to come up with big picture ideas and ideation. I is actually my third one. So that's interesting because I is part of that higher phase or the higher altitude, they call it in the working genius, the more big picture thinking. But the W really can drain me. So for instance, if people want to have a big brainstormer to come up with a lot of great ideas, I don't mind participating in those, but I've learned over time, hey, that may cause me frustration if there's a lot of it, because I always want to pull down to, okay, you have an idea? Great, let's implement it. Let's get it done. So when there's just a lot of idea and people pondering and pontificating at the higher altitudes of a project, I'm just sort of like, can we get on with it, please? Which I've realized through the working genius, like there's a reason I'm feeling that way. I do have to dial that down. It's a very important part of the process, but I don't always have to be part of that process.
Right.
So let the dreamers dream, and I'll come in and use up. Discernment is a competency. So some of these ideas that come, it's like, okay, yeah, this idea has some legs, or this idea, I'm not so sure. So that's where I've been able to at least identify a little bit more why I might be getting drained, or why I'm not getting drained, why I'm getting more energized.
Are you still with the same business partner?
I am, but he's silent now. So we meet once every other week, but he's a classic startup guy that when things started getting a little stable, he got a little bored. He was like, I can't do this. He's also a really zany guy. So HR was like, yeah, this guy's gonna get us sued or something.
I know the type. Do you know his geniuses?
Yes, he is an IG. So it's really interesting because we look back when we started the business and it's like we're IG and GT. So we're both double disruptors. So in the working genius, just to explain, if you're an IG or T, you're on the more disruptive side. The WDE is the more responsive side. And most people are a balance of both, but there's the double responders or double disruptors. And it was really interesting to look back, and we laugh now. We're like, how did this business actually like take off with no wonder in there? We're both frustrated by wonder. Our approach was ready, fire, aim.
Right.
Let's just try a bunch of things, but we were excited and he had a lot of ideas and we're both just excited about all the ideas, and I had the tea to get it done. So from that aspect, we worked really well together. But looking back, we were missing a few critical pieces. We were both competent. We are both competent in discern. So I think that's probably what saved us.
Okay.
We were leaning heavily into the discernment. So fortunately for us, there were enough good ideas that had legs. it is an interesting dynamic between us. And it's funny to look back on that.
And do you know your husband's geniuses?
Yes. So my husband is an interesting one because he's WT. So he's at the very high end of like the first phase and the get it done phase. So that's helped me understand him more because sometimes like I like to land the plane. Like I'm in the phase of work where I get excited from spinning momentum around something and getting it done. So like, let's just land the plane. Let's just land the plane.
Right.
And people who like to wonder don't always want to land the plane. Like sometimes they just want to talk. They don't always want you to start discerning or galvanizing their ideas. They're like, okay, let's just slow down. Let's just think about this. And it's helped me understand that sometimes it's okay just to be up in that altitude and fly around at 30,000 feet and talk about ideas and concepts. And we don't always have to land the plane. But I will say being married to a fellow T is a good match for us because we both love to get things done. And we're in that mode. It's just things get done around the house with the kids, things like that. So that is nice.
So the WTs amaze me. So do you have an example of a brainstorm to them where it gets done?
Yeah, I mean, he's very creative in his own way, but he wouldn't be like your classic creative, like an artist. He's an engineer, a statistician by trade. So I notice it for things maybe around the house. He's pretty handy. He likes problem solving. So he'll take something around the house that needs a solution and he'll think about it and come up with it. And then like next thing you know, he's at the hardware store. He's pulling up. He is taking that idea and putting it into action. So it's kind of funny to see him like just skip all the other phases. Like I'm assuming, he's a smart guy. He's obviously discerning in something. It doesn't mean we're not doing any of the middle phases, but it's like, what could be accomplished here? Okay, let's accomplish it. That's kind of like how he works.
Yes, that makes sense. And yeah, we were just talking about our children, and I'm very interested to find out my children's geniuses because I feel like with the 4 children, the 5 of us here, that the whole widget is definitely here. I just don't know I have a hunch who falls into what, but it is running a company, running a family, like everyone does play their role. And I think I just love that Working Genius gives us the verbiage for that. So I'm going to back way up because I knew the Canada and I knew North Carolina. I guess I assumed there was a more in between, but so you went from Canada and then came to North Carolina to start this company. Is that?
Yes. So the in-between phases, I started working at a small company that manufactured garden arbors, like little archways for the yard. And it was primarily for the professional fence industry. So if you went to a fence contractor, hey, can you put a fence in my yard? I really want an arbor to go with my fence, something decorative. This company focused only on that. So I started working for them, of course, just until I found a job in my field. Now, the irony is I actually went to school to do networking and computers, and I was a network administrator. So, and I had worked in Ottawa, which at that time was the Silicon Valley of Canada, in IT. Looking back, like that, talking about working geniuses, like a GT should not be in a cold server room. It explains so much about why I didn't like it, but I wanted to move back to my hometown and be closer to family. And I kept looking for an IT job because when you're young and you invested all the time and money in schooling, that's what you do. And a friend called me and said, look, I know you're looking for an IT job, but this company needs some help. It's a little bit more sales oriented. They need help selling arbors to professional fencers in the States. And I said, okay, I like the people just until I can find something in my field.
Oh, yes.
Famous last words. But what was interesting about that is it was in the early 2000s. So it was before the .com industry was really like .com was there, but it was still so new. And we were shipping these arbor boxes via UPS and FedEx, which nobody was doing. And one of the fence companies I was dealing with called and said, hey, could you ship one of those arbors, UPS or FedEx, anywhere in the US? Well, I don't see why not. He said, okay, great. So next thing you know, and this is dating myself, but there's an old print fax machine, the do 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 do. Now, I will say I'm not that old. I still don't know why. Like email was very used. I don't know why this guy was faxing in orders, but he was faxing in orders. Handwritten, chicken scrawl on a sheet, ship one Nantucket arbor to so-and-so in New Jersey. So we'd go to the UPS terminal, type it in, put it on the box, ship it to New Jersey. But these orders kept coming in. And it's like, okay, one order one day, two orders the next. And I called him. I still remember his name was Emilio. I said, Emilio, you are in New Jersey. You're a fence company in New Jersey. How are you selling all these arbors all over the country? And he said, oh, it's eBay. I'm selling your product on eBay. I was like, okay, hey, a sale is a sale. Right. But that whole thing made us realize we can ship product anywhere. A lot of manufacturers weren't willing to do that at the time. They wanted to ship truckload to distribution centers. And so Sam's Club.com, Costco.com, these big .com companies were like, wait, you don't have to inventory your product. You'll hold the inventory, ship it to our customer, like sign me up. So then they started asking for fencing. Now, fencing is a commodity. You don't really want to ship commodity.com, at least not in the mid 2000s when everyone could just go to their local hardware store. But we got introduced to a no-dig fence solution, and that's probably more technical than anybody on this podcast cares, but that was the disruptive business model that we needed. So the owner of that company came to me and said, actually, there's a little bit of an interesting piece there. After we got on samsclub.com and all of the big .comers, arbors was a small category. I was getting bored. And looking back again, I think that was working genius. I didn't really I wasn't working at the higher altitudes to think like, let's expand new products or whatever. I was like, I got all these arbors, and there was a lot of sales work involved because I was going to Sam's Club and talking to the buyers to get everything set up. So I was galvanizing, setting everything up. And then I was like, well, what's next? I'm kind of bored here. So I went to the owner and like, hey, it's been great. It's been fun. I'm in my late 20s. I think I'm going to go to Toronto or just go like do something else. And he said, okay. I said, I'm giving you lots of warning, lots of notice, like, probably about, however much you want. And he came to me shortly after and said, hey, I am really thinking like we should start a .com fence business, but we should do it in the US because it's really hard being in Canada selling when all your customers are in the US. We're crossing the border. Customs is like, wait, are you working? No, we're not working. Or you have samples? No, like it was all above board, but they don't like it when you keep crossing the bridge to come to a trade show or something like that. So he said, come with me to North Carolina, start this business. This is going to give you the challenge you're looking for. And in exchange for sweat equity, I'll give you ownership. So that was sort of the whole missing piece. And I think a lot of, you can't really galvanize early on in the days, but I think it just required so much tenacity that I was getting a lot of joy and energy just from the sheer challenge and the grit required. And there was a lot of missteps along the way, a lot of discouragement along the way. Things always he jokes, he's like, everything takes twice as long, costs twice as much, and for half the results. And I think he's a little bit pessimistic, but if you say it with like an element of joy, it's like that's actually probably kind of true. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. So
yes, that makes total sense. And I think that's another element of Working Genius too. It can be kind of industry related, which what you were saying, like the people in the shipping are more likely to be in the ET range. But overall, like we are humans meant to grow, right? And boredom doesn't necessarily mean that, you're unhappy with the industry or you're unhappy with the job. It could just be unhappy with the line of work that you're falling in because of the geniuses, or you're not deriving energy in that way from that same segment again. So you can take the working genius and evolve into a different industry or into a different role. It's more of like the line of work that you're doing and the tasks that you're doing that bring you joy and energy. And I can see how that has kind of evolved in your story as well. Just out of curiosity, was there a bit of culture shock when
It is funny because like the city I was born and raised in is a border town. So going over to the States, even just to load up the car with gas or go grocery shopping was pretty common. But it was it was more different than I thought. It wasn't crazy culture shock. It was just the subtle nuances. The whole healthcare was a really a big like, whoa, wait, what, how do you, like, I still don't understand it that much because I just didn't grow up with any of that. Well, I shouldn't say I still don't. I understand it, but there's still a lot of nuances, and I think a lot of Americans themselves get confused by the medical system. Some of the politics, certain things culturally in Canada, like I definitely don't want to get political, but just very black and white. Like in Canada, there is no amendment that you have a right to bear arms. So it's not part of our culture. People aren't walking around. Okay. It's just not a conversation. So when I came here and it was a really big, hot topic, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I didn't really thought about that. Like, so certain things like that were kind of shocking, but nothing like too crazy. So,
okay. So were you married in Canada or did you get married in North Carolina?
I actually met my husband here. So
in North Carolina?
In Charlotte. Yeah. We met at a cornhole tournament, a charity cornhole tournament. So
that's very culturally appropriate.
Yes. I didn't, that's one cultural difference. Now they know what cornhole is in my hometown, but at that point, nobody knew what cornhole was.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So that's great. I mean, I was kind of hoping that's what it was, that journey had brought you here and then that had evolved. So when you and I were talking before, and so I'm going to discuss more of like joy in hard times or joy in our personal life, because Working Genius overall is about living and working in your joy. And that is the premise of why I even started my own company. That is the premise of why I started this podcast. And Working Genius was actually what got me to drink the Kool-Aid that joy matters in the first place. So when I told you that when we were talking earlier, somehow divorce came up, and and a bunch of my pre-interviews, divorce has come up in my story. And particularly when you were like, I'm sorry to hear that. When I got off the call with you and the way that I had responded to you, I was just like, wow, I don't even know when that actually developed, when I could say that divorce was a positive in my life and is the whole reason I'm in this realm that I'm in right now. And it just kind of gave me a kind of an aha moment of like, oh, that was something that was very devastating at a time in my life. And now I can speak to it with genuine joy. Not that I like having it as a part of my story, but that it has created an evolution that has brought me here in these spaces today. Can you tell me about a time when something that wasn't okay, did not feel good in the moment, but has resulted in something joyful today?
Yeah. I mean, I can think of two things, one personal, one business. I can start with the business one. It was early on in our the startup days, we decided we were going to go direct to consumer. So even though at the Arbor company, we had done a lot of samsclub.com and things like that, we thought, let's go direct to consumer. We were really curious about that. And it was respectable. In part, this was like, I think 2010, 2011, in part because the search engine rankings, you could like crack the code. So we were ranking organically, and all that means is when you typed in like, I need a fence, our website would come up really high. So we were getting a lot of leads, and that's really important to a business that's selling direct. And you can do paid ads and whatnot, but we're all aware that the paid ads, you'd like to see the organic listing. So we were humming along and we thought, things are going pretty well. And overnight, I remember, and I don't do this anymore. This is where I'm a little older and wiser, but startup days, first thing I would do when I woke up in the morning was check my email. bad. I don't do that anymore. Don't do that if anyone out there is doing it. And I got an email from Google saying, due to a bunch of, I'm paraphrasing, but due to a bunch of very bad links on your website, we have delisted your website from all of our algorithms. Like you are in, it was called the black box at that time.
Like jail, like
yeah, purgatory. We were in like Google purgatory. Like you could not even find if you Googled Wham Bam Fence, which is the name of the brand, it wouldn't even serve anything organically, like completely blacklisted. So we had done some paid ads and whatnot, but that could be very expensive. So within overnight, our whole business strategy was up in flames. And I'd subsequently found out that other companies could maliciously link to your site. And if Google was catching sight of like some dubious links, like, a bad website linking to you, they would assume you're affiliated. And when there was enough of that, so it was a target. It was like a spam attack, but I wasn't aware that this was a thing. We were completely innocent, except for, not having, except for the ignorant part of it.
Right.
Had to hire some fancy company in New York who had experience in getting out of this purgatory, which, could take weeks and months. And Google had updated their whole algorithm and it was never going back. So this was a real oh my goodness, we don't have a business anymore. And overnight, something completely out of our control has caused this to go up in smoke. And we realized that, hey, direct to consumer, there is a time and a place for that, but we can't solely rely on that. And we do have relationships with HomeDepot.com and Amazon.com. So let's leverage those relationships. It's going to be harder. It's going to be less margin. We have less control over our product. Back then, that you didn't have all the pretty listings that you could. It was just very hard to educate the customer, especially fencing can be complicated. But we were sort of forced in that time of duress to pivot. And that actually was what caused the business to take off. So that horrible moment was such a blessing in disguise because it propelled a whole new product line, a whole new brand, a whole new everything. And it really was the catalyst for the business to be some semblance of success.
I think that's a perfect example, especially for entrepreneurs like myself and anybody out there that is having to, what you were talking about, like .com, I just watched You've Got Mail with and they're dialing up to get their email.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot. And even now as AI is taking over and people are like, oh no, there are ways to pivot with that. Do you know what has made you able to do that, or the agility that you had for that pivot?
Yeah.
Is that something that you derived personally? Is that just you had that moment and you're like, I have to make this happen?
That's a good question. I think if in that case, I wasn't ready to give up. I didn't want to go back to Canada with my, I thought my mantra in life, I guess, has been, I want to at least look myself in the eyes, in the mirror and say, you did everything you could. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, if I look at myself in the mirror and say, you did everything you could, and I know there's nothing more I could do, then I give myself permission to walk away. And at that point, I knew I hadn't done everything I could. I did want to crawl under a rock. I didn't want to have to go try to reinvent. But I guess instinctively, I just knew that I would have possibly been prematurely giving up. And I would always wonder, what would have happened had you just given it a little bit more oomph? And I kind of think, again, bringing it back to the working genius, that's probably where the tenacity comes in a bit. I am unable or unwilling to give up. That can be a strength, but sometimes it can also maybe be taken a little bit too far.
That is very interesting. In fact, one thing I think you were meant to say that to me personally. I don't know if anybody else is grabbing from that, but I did. But I also have, and tenacity is my frustration. And maybe I am exhausted after I do things like that. I'll have to take note, but I am very similar in that respect. In fact, my daughter and I just had this, this is going to be a weird comparison, but I remember saying to her, now you know what your mom was willing to do when she's made up her mind. But we were at a lake I brought my blow up paddle board. My pump had gotten a tear in the hose, and that should have been a 5-minute process to get us on the water. And we spent 2 hours, and I won't go through all the lengths of what we had to do to get that paddle board on the water. But I was like, when I have made up my mind, then I am going to do that. So there is a tenacious element. So that's just interesting in the Working Genius. And I'm going to take note of that when those things take place, kind of how I feel afterwards.
And I think you've touched on something really interesting, that sometimes I've observed that there can almost be a trap with the Working Genius, like, oh, they're the idea people. I'm frustrated by I don't need to come up with ideas. And that's absolutely not true, because we're all creative beings. And I think probably what you're talking about there is grit, which is a really great trait. And you're like, and that's to me a little separate from the Working Genius. The Working Genius, the tenacity, that can come into play there. But I think sometimes you can separate tenacity and grit, and you just had grit. You're like, no, I'm committed to doing this, and I'm going to do it. And that was awesome that you were able to show your daughter that kind of grit.
Yeah. And now as I'm going into my own entrepreneurship, hopefully that kicks in too, because at the end of the day, you're the entire widget when you are starting out, like you said at the beginning of your startup. Okay, so if you're willing to share about pursuing joy in your personal life from taking something negative and seeing a positive in it later, are you willing to share that as well? Okay.
Yeah, I think the main thing that comes to mind, it was about 10 years ago, and it was when we were in the business, we were trying to get the .com partnerships going. So it was okay, but it felt like a grind. It was a little discouraging. The business was still like, are we ever like, I was fortunate enough to be collecting a modest paycheck. So we were doing okay, but the prospects weren't looking great. Like that, this is really going to be a really viable engine moving forward. So I was dealing with that. My husband and I had gotten married the year prior. He was an engineer by trade, hated engineering, was looking for new engineering jobs. And again, Working Genius. Now, we didn't know that language then, but engineering jobs and all the interviews were sucking the life out of him. So he decided to go back to grad school to be a statistician, but the program was a couple hours away. So he ended up moving away, and we were doing a weekend marriage. So that was going on. The business was fledgling, and we decided when graduation was in sight that we were going to start a family. So the good news is I got pregnant pretty quickly, but I was really, really sick for the first trimester. So I was alone. I was sick. The business was like, So that was a really tough time. And then in the second trimester, I lost the baby. And at that point, I was going into a pretty depressed state for all of these reasons, struggling to find joy. Struggling to find meaning, like what is the point of all of this? And just feeling a grief and a heartbreak for this unborn baby that was very new to me. I feel like miscarriages aren't always that talked about.
No,
everyone's like, wait until 12 weeks. I did that. And then, and it's like, well, why do we have to wait till 12 weeks? Like women should not be suffering this burden silently, or there shouldn't be a shame associated. That's a whole other conversation. But that was a period of life where I really struggled to find joy. And I worked through it. Sometimes I think you just have to seeking support systems. It's interesting. My OB office called and said, hey, we have some free therapy for grief. And I was like, I'll be okay. Like very shut down. I don't need that. And she actually was borderline pushy, but in the right way. And that was the right call. Because after a couple sessions of the special, I forget what it was called. I don't know if it was CBT or something, but grief therapy that really moved the needle for me. It was interesting when I think about joy. Can't say this too loud. I'm not like a huge pet person, but my one friend, my dear friend, picked me up. She was the one that was at the hospital with me. And because my husband he was trying to make it home. Of course,
Mhm.
he had some big exam. I didn't tell him because I knew it was an exam right away.
Yeah.
Like, looking back, you don't know if you made all the right decisions.
Right. Right.
She took me back to her house, and they had this little dog, and this little dog just laid with me the whole, like, I was there for a few days, just laid with me and was with me. And looking back, I'm like, that little dog was such a source of joy and comfort to me in like unexpected places. I still love that dog. Every time I see that dog, I'm like, oh, that dog was like very emotionally supportive to me. But what's interesting is through that difficult time, my husband did graduate and he got a really great job. That was a dream job of his. And I went on to have two healthy boys. And it's really hard to look back because it's just like, I don't know what would have happened had I not miscarried that baby. But I do know for sure, based on the timing, I wouldn't have these two beautiful boys in my life. Like, they wouldn't be in the world, and they
Right.
were meant to be. So through all of that, it's like you don't understand looking forward, but looking back, even though it's still, you
Mhm.
don't understand the why, or like, why did it have to happen that way? I know, like, no, this was the way it was meant to be. And these two beautiful boys I have are in this world having their experience, teaching me what I need to know. My oldest, I love him. He is very much a handful. He has taught me so much about myself in life. And it just, looking back, it's like it was the way things had to happen.
Yes.
So
I see that. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I know when I had a miscarriage, it all of a sudden, all these women were like, oh, yeah, this happened to me then. And this happened. And then because at first you're kind of like, well, I'm just broken, or my body
yeah,
is broken, and I'm just the anomaly out here. But as soon as it's very common. And I understand why it's not talked about all the time, especially if you have your children right here that you're bragging on. But
yeah,
yes, it is a hard thing. And also, I think that also promotes community once people start actually sharing that experience with you as
yes,
well.
I
So,
agree 100%.
how would you say, personally or professionally or in a season of growth, are you pursuing joy right now?
That's a great question, because I feel like currently the business is going through another crisis. So it'll be funny to look back at an
Okay.
interview in a couple of years. We manufacture overseas, primarily in
Okay.
China, and this trade war has really, really been difficult on the business. A lot of uncertainty. 90-day pauses are nice, but it just extends the uncertainty for 90 days. That has been really interesting for me, because for the first time ever, the business is starting to contract a little bit while we try to figure things out. And I do much better with growth and championing things. And I feel like now every community lunch, we do a community lunch once a month, and I'm getting up there and I'm just delivering a whole bunch of bad news.
Right.
Tariffs, well, they were this, now they're that, and they're this and they're that. And so it's been really interesting. It's been really good for personal growth, but it's been difficult. And the Working Genius has helped me understand how to navigate this for me a little bit more, to find joy. For
Mhm.
one, right now, there's a lot of that ideation, new suppliers, new products. How can we do this? How can we do
Mhm.
that? And
Right.
we have a lot of very talented people in the organization who thrive in that kind of work. And in the past, I think I would have been like, oh, this is my business, I have to. And I still do want to be involved and like know what's going on. But it's like, no, they can do that. And for me, I'm okay just to sit with some of this discomfort. I need to learn how to sit
Okay.
with this discomfort. And honestly, like, that's part of the reason I'm talking to you today. It's like, I do need to galvanize, and I have to, instead of like going and being able to do it I still am doing it at work, but it's like opening up conversations with people like yourself, being more connected with the Working Genius network to share with things like that. That's kind of scratching some of that itch. And even for tenacity, there's always stuff to do in a business. So that's
Yes.
not too much, but there's a few projects. My wedding album, I've been meaning to do that thing for over 10 years. And Julie, I got it done in the last couple months.
Oh
And
my
I
goodness.
think it's just because I'm sitting here going like, I like a really big, long list of to-dos to check off. And so some of these really neglected ones
Right.
are getting checked off. So it is very interesting to me and searching and figuring out like what brings me joy and just dialing down. Like I got a bird feeder and it's amazing. Every morning I just try to take some time and sit out there, and there's a beautiful red cardinal that comes to that bird feeder. And it's like that brings me joy. Like it doesn't always have to be the
Right.
big things, the big accounts, the big sales growth, the this, the that. Like how can I find joy in the small things? Because really at the end of the day, that's all we have are
Right.
the constants. It's what brings my spirit life and energy and joy. Even things like playing with my kids,
Mhm.
reading a good old fashioned paperback or
Right.
novel. Like there's something that gets lost when you're always on your devices. So that's how I've been seeking joy during this difficult time. And it's been hard. I still kind of would prefer the old way, but I see it as a necessary path for me. And again, the Working Genius has really helped me understand like these kind of things bring me joy. So how can I find more of them? So forums, communities, things like that.
So I'm curious, based on what you've experienced in the past with the business and things that y'all have been able to overcome, do you feel more at peace with this situation based on what's happened in the past? Or does it still feel like, oh, here we go again? What is that level?
It's both. The experience side of me is completely confident we will get through this. It's not going to be fun. And I would almost bet that we're going to look back and say that this is one of those inflection points where a seemingly bad situation turned into some good things. I feel very confident about that. On my less Zen days, I'm still freaking out inside. I'm still riddled with the what ifs, the uncertainty. Like there's a lot of payroll here. There's a lot of people to, it does feel heavy on my shoulders. But overall, I do feel very confident that we are figuring it out. We're going to be able to figure it out. And been doing this now for 16 years, and businesses feels like one big game of whack-a-mole, just gotta whack down the problems as they come. This one seems like it's like, 3 holes worth of whack-a-moles, like it needs, not the little hammer, like, something a lot bigger, but it's just trying to keep things in perspective, knowing we're going to be okay. One way or another, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, no, that's a great outlook. So do you enjoy doing Working Genius facilitation, or are you open to doing that more, or what is your level?
Yeah, I think I would be. My priority is always going to be with the business, but definitely now in this period of time where I'm like, oh man, how can I galvanize? How can I get things done? Again, there always is work, but yes, I do enjoy doing some of the facilitation. And I would say for me, what I've thought about is I would love to just like help out a not-for-profit or something, maybe an early startup or a bootstrapper. I'm a good candidate for someone that maybe wants to get into Working Genius, but they don't have a big budget to hire, a really expensive facilitator. I got certified for the business. I have some experience with the business. It's very limited to my sphere and those other companies I spoke about earlier. But there is a part of me that just wants to share the word and help people out in whatever limited capacity my time will permit. But it does scratch the galvanizing itch for sure.
No, I feel the same way. I got a lot of business advice as I was starting this business to go towards more of the high dollar revenue businesses out there. Part is truly with startup and the nonprofits as well. There's just there's grit, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I like to gear my recruiting towards those business types as well. So what is the best way, if anyone is interested in a Working Genius facilitation or just talking Working Genius or even pivoting with different business models, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. It's Denise Shields. I actually, it's terrible. I should be better about this, but
we'll put it up.
Denise Shields on Niche Brands, you'll find me for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And this was a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad that you were here and were able to share with us. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks so much, Julie.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.